Okay, so I am back with some more game analysis, and this game I am playing white against an expert. So yeah, let's just get started. So yeah, I can play, I've been playing many different openings recently, either some d4, some knight f3, some e4. This game I decided to play d4, and okay, we ended up getting a Slav. And, well, okay, I've played a lot of different lines against the Slav over the years, but this game I decided to try out a Catalan style approach. So my opponent plays, yeah, one of the kind of trendy ways for black to play with e6, the semi-Slav, and, well, okay, of course there's all of the very theoretical lines after bishop g5, and black can take on c4, and also after e3, black can try to play the Moran with knight c2, or knight bd7. Okay, white can avoid the Moran by playing queen c2, but yeah, I wasn't really too interested in playing any of that this game. I just decided to play g3, which is not really as well explored an avenue for white as far as the other lines. Like, I mean, obviously bishop g5, there's a ton of theory behind that move. e3, knight bd7, I mean, all of the Moran lines like this, after b5 and then bishop b7, this is all very, very well explored. And generally black is, I think, considered to be doing quite fine there. Queen c2 is like a little bit fresher, I think. At least people are still trying to figure out new ways for white to go in this line, avoiding the typical Moran variation. So like after d takes c4, white could actually play a4, and then recapture this with the bishop later, and not allow black this typical plan of b5 and bishop b7, to play c5, which he likes to do in the typical Moran after bishop d3. Okay, but I mean, anyway, yeah, none of that happened in this game. I decided to play g3. And yeah, I mean, of course, the critical way for black to play against this is to, at some point, take on c4 and try to hold on to this pawn with b5. It's really the only critical way for black to play this. Like, if you don't do this, then white, as we see in the game, can pretty much get a pretty easy position, just be better, for really not much of that work out of the opening. And yeah, so what happened was he plays knight b7, bishop g2. Of course, every move here he should be taking on c4. Okay, he plays bishop b7, we both castle. And at this point, we've actually transposed to a quiet variation of the Catalan, where black does not really try to be super ambitious and trying to equalize right from the opening. Like, he's not trying to take on c4, he's not trying to hold on to this pawn, just kind of, passively developing, and then the plan is to slowly play b6, bishop b7, and play for c5. Which, okay, I mean, the plan can work, but you have to be very careful about it. You have to be very careful that white does not get to play e4 too quickly, and you'll get into a situation where you might never be able to play c5. So, okay, now here I actually make a pretty instructive mistake, although it is quite a common mistake in this position. So, what white should play is probably a move like b3, and then bishop b2. And then later, if I want to prepare e4, I can play the queen c2 or queen d3, and then prepare e4 that way. What I played in the game is knight d2, which is a pretty typical maneuver in the Catalan to prepare e4 as well. But actually here, it's a pretty serious accuracy, which does allow black to equalize on the spot. And the move is not b6, which my opponent played. This kind of just allows white to play e4 with no problems at all. But actually the move is b5, somewhat surprising. And actually, yeah, it turns out that because of this one kind of backward knight move that white has made, black is able to meet this with queen b6. And this is actually a pretty good idea to be familiar with in these kind of positions, which I feel like I've seen this before, kind of very, very vaguely. But yeah, I've never actually had this over the board in any of my games. I've never seen this idea like actually happen over the board anywhere. But yeah, that's a pretty good trick to know. And of course, I mean, if white tries to hold on to the knight with a4, it can always be kicked away with a6. And yeah, after knight c3, black can just take on d4. And it's important here that black's knight has already developed to d7. If the knight was like back on d8, then I mean, the only thing white can really try here is the move e4 to try and take advantage of potentially some weakness along this diagonal. But okay, here black can simply meet it with bishop b7. And white can try taking this, and then can try this move knight b3. But here, black has a pretty simple answer. You can just trade queens and play knight b6. So if this knight was already on like b8, then it wouldn't be so easy. Because I think there, you wouldn't be able to play knight b6 so easily. And if you took on c3, I think there would be the enemies of bishop takes b7. Like like at the end of that line, knight takes d1, bishop takes a8, this knight would be in danger of getting trapped. The bishop can come back to f3. And even if it doesn't, white will just have two bishops for free in the endgame with the weak pawn on a7. So that would be pretty bad for black. But because this knight is already developed here, yeah, black can just play knight b6, and it's just completely equal. Black holds onto the d5 square and has no real problems at all. So yeah, that is a good trick to know. It's actually, knight d2 scores very well for white. And yeah, not everybody has actually found this move b5 over the board. But yeah, it's definitely a good equalizing shot to know about. So okay, instead my opponent plays b6. Yeah, so clearly neither one of us was familiar with this idea, b5. Okay, now I get to play e4, and he decides to take. It's really not a problem to take on c4 and try this move bishop a6, because I can very comfortably play b3. And I mean, even all these aggressive moves like b5 and even b4, it only leads to a weakening of black's position. The center is very well protected, and yeah, I mean, now black is only creating more targets for himself later. So something like this is not really feasible. So he decides to take on e4, knight takes e4, bishop e7, and okay, here I'm just developing normally, bishop f4. So yeah, really black's only way to equalize now is to play one of these breaks, e5 or c5. E5 is going to be harder to achieve because I just don't have that many pieces working behind it, and I can very easily put like a rook on e1, a bishop on f4, and stop you. c5 is much more attainable because black at least has, you know, a few pawns and pieces around it that can help prepare it. But yeah, as we'll see here, I think already black is in some pretty serious strategic trouble because yeah, I think pretty much I can guarantee that black is never going to be able to play c5, and that means that eventually I will be able to play c5 myself, and we'll see that happen in the game. That's pretty much a textbook way of dominating this bishop and forcing black into a passive defense for pretty much the whole game. So he takes on e4 and plays knight f6. This is very natural because I was hinting at jumping into d6. And I mean, anyway, black wants to trade some pieces and avoid his cramped position. Okay, I mean, there's many ways white can play here. You can just kind of centralize your rooks. But yeah, I thought it was a little bit the most precise thing to do would be to play queen c2. So I can quickly get this rook to d1. I'm using a tactic here. You cannot take on d4 because then rook a1 simply traps the queen. And, well, even if he takes on e4, I have this tempo on h7. I mean, even now, if you wanted to take this, this will probably not be very good for you because the rook is going to invade on d7. So yeah, d4 is tactically defended, and there's always this pin along the diagonal, so black is never in time to play c5 here because I can just take on d6, take on d7. But yeah, now it turns out after this, okay, I'm attacking h7, he plays h6. Here, basically black is already kind of doomed never to be able to play c5 because you cannot do it right now, and as soon as you defend this bishop and somehow organize a way to prepare c5, as soon as you're threatening to play c5, I will play c5 myself. I already have enough support behind it, that's why c2 is a good square for the queen here. And yeah, I mean, I'll just see in the game. Once I get this pawn to c5, black's position becomes quite passive. So rook a1, bishop d6. Yeah, this is a decision I really wasn't sure about, and I'm still not sure about it here. Is whether or not it's better for white to keep the dark square bishops on the board and the resulting structure. I mean, kind of conventional wisdom would tell you that you should keep the bishops on the board because white is the one who's going to have more space, and probably, you know, that'll just increase black's difficulties if he has one extra piece kind of clunking around with very few squares to move to. But I mean, as we'll see in the game, white gets a pretty large advantage anyway, even without the dark square bishop, so yeah, maybe this is not really super important. But yeah, I mean, bishop e3 was also very playable. And then after queen e7, and then finally threatening to play c5, white of course plays c5. And after bishop c7, rook e1, okay, we got a similar structure in the game, except without the dark square bishops. Okay, so I take on d6, I play c5 right away, queen d8, and rook f1. So yeah, after queen f6, now I play b4. And yeah, I have to say pretty much, like, besides my one inaccuracy there of playing knight d2 in the opening, my play has pretty much been spot on so far. I mean, all these moves have been pretty easy for me to make, but yeah, this is kind of exactly what you want to be doing with white in this kind of position. But okay, so here, obviously I'm threatening b5, which is going to be very unpleasant. And I also can, at any moment, threaten to take this and then take on c6. And if you try to pin me with rook c8, I can react with b5, just cementing my bishop there and keeping my extra pawn. So black makes a very understandable decision there to play b5. Of course, it makes this bishop even worse because it never has any hope of activating along this diagonal. And it also gives me this extra pawn break of playing a4. And yet, at this point, I would say I definitely misunderstood the position a little bit. I mean, obviously I understood that white is much better here, but I didn't really understand like what is the long-term vision of this position and how white should actually be ultimately trying to win this position. So I considered what I think the best move now is a4. Okay, obviously black is not really going to be interested in this, just giving himself more weaknesses, so he's going to play a6. But it didn't really occur to me, like, you know, I saw this and I thought, well, I'm not really threatening to take on b5, because black seems perfectly able to take with this pawn and open up the rook on the a file. And, you know, I didn't really think it would be feasible to try and double my rooks over here and prepare, like, to open the a file and break through somehow, because I have this d pawn to protect. This is pretty much the only weakness in my position, this pawn on d4, but it supports my entire space grip that is, you know, being held by this pawn on c5. But yeah, it actually did not occur to me how powerful this would be to actually play a5. So this is actually the best way to play this position. After kind of analyzing this for quite some time, it's the conclusion I've come to, that white should actually shut down the queen side. Because black's only counterplay, which he ended up getting in the game, is to play a5. That's the only way black is going to get any activity for the rooks. The only other break you have is e5, but white can make sure to tactically prevent that. Obviously right now e5 is not possible because I can take, and if the queen takes, then there's going to be bishop h7 at the end. And it's just not going to be feasible for black to prepare. I mean, I can always put a queen on c3 and support this pawn. You know, I can play even f4 if I really need to. Oftentimes just put a rook on e5 to blockade it, and any move like f6 is going to be way too weakening for black. It's going to weaken the king side too much. So e5 is not really a feasible pawn break. The only really feasible pawn break black has is a5. And what you do when you play a4, a6, and a5 is you totally freeze this. You freeze the queen side, you give black absolutely no counterplay. And I mean, the concern that comes in here is, well, is this going to be a fortress? But yeah, as I played this out actually against the engine, I tried to defend this position with black, and I saw how the engine takes you apart here. And this is really instructive. So there's a lot of slow maneuvering that you have to do, but okay. So I tried rook d8, and I'm going to double here. The very first thing that the engine does is to kind of set up its pieces in a very good way to make sure this d pawn is well protected. So the queen is ideally placed on c3, because it also guards the e5 square. Now after rook d7, it plays bishop c2, and then rook e4. So we're defending this pawn laterally, and the bishop on c2 is importantly defending the rook on d1, so there's never any idea to play e5, and after rook takes e5, queen takes e5, because this rook is defended. Now, okay, what is white going to do next? Well, okay, bishop goes to b3. That's reinforcing d5 square even more, so this rook never has any hope of getting activity. And also looking at the e6 pawn, and it's still defending the rook on d1, so d3 is definitely the best place for this bishop. Okay, black really cannot do anything here but wait. That's the really depressing thing about this position. Like, black has to just sit. And white has this is like the ideal position for this rook, because later it can go to f4, or it can go to e5 and just smother the queen, and really eliminate black's only hope, which is to attack this d4 pawn. So okay, so let's just see what happens. Yeah, h4, h5, queen e3. Okay, here we go. So it puts the rook on f4. I try to keep the queen on the diagonal to keep pressuring this pawn. Okay, but now comes queen f3. And attacking this pawn, and anyway, black cannot afford to take this because f7 is hanging. But after bishop b7, okay, now the rook comes into f6. And now we can really see how, you know, powerfully cramped black's position is. Okay, after king g8, now the queen comes up to f4, so keeping d4 well protected. And yeah, it's really only a matter of time now before some kind of decisive sacrifice or breakthrough is going to happen. So I'm kind of resorted to just playing passive waiting, so I play rook e7, rook e1, go back to d7. Okay, the rook comes to e4. Yeah, this position was like, it's quite incredible. It's close to zugzwang here, because I didn't want to move this bishop. Like bishop c8, I thought maybe I'm allowing even some queen b8, and the queen come into b6 somehow. I was also worried about sacrifices on e6. And anyway, like, yeah, I mean, humanly, it's really difficult to actually hold this position with black, so maybe rook e7. The way I defended it, I'm sure, is not the best way, but just to kind of illustrate what happens. Okay, the other rook comes into e4, so still defending this pawn laterally. This is kind of the best ideal system for white to do. Okay, I'm still moving around, queen e5, king h7. Okay, the other rook comes to f4, so you can really see how white is building up here. yeah, eventually the way the final sacrifice comes is very instructive. So g4 at some point once white's pieces are fully optimized, plays g4. Yeah, and I mean I really like this move king g2 also, just not in any rush at all. In fact, if you wanted to, you could even march this king to c3, although that's not really necessary. There's no danger at all in doing that, because black has no way to open up the center. And the king could just be used to defend the d4 pawn and free up some white's major pieces. But after king g2 rook f8, yeah, the engine decided it was not even necessary to bring the king over here and just play g4 right away. And yeah, I mean black's position falls apart. I tried queen h7. I don't want to take this and allow rook takes, and then h5 is coming in. And otherwise this is a threat, so try queen h7. And I mean, there's a million ways to win here. You can, I'm sure, take on h5. I'm sure you can just march the king over here and eventually sacrifice on e6 or g6 or f7. But yeah, queen takes e6 was quite a nasty way to end the game. And yeah, I mean black is actually just winning. He's winning back the queen with interest here. After takes, rook takes f8, king g7, bishop takes e6. There's no defense to rook f7. Queen is trapped. Okay, yeah, I mean now it's pretty clear the game is over here. Rook f7, and white will vacuum up all of black's pieces. So yeah, basically, short story, black does not have a fortress here. That's really the only concern that I would have with locking up the queen side, is like, now I have to break through on the king side somehow. But yeah, there's simply going to be no fortress. And yeah, I like this idea of sometimes marching the king to c3. Once you have the e5 break fully under control, and we saw that position where like white's pieces were fully optimized here, and this other rook came into to f4. Yeah, this is like the kind of perfect situation where you can put the king on d3 just to reinforce the d4 pawn a little bit more, and then the final breakthrough will happen with like f3 or g4 or something. So yeah, now what happened in the game was a little bit different. So I played rook e3, which, I mean, it's a reasonable move. It doesn't really spoil the advantage. But after rook f8, okay, rook f3, queen e7, queen e2. Yeah, here was kind of maybe my last chance to play queen c3 and prevent the move a5. Again, I played queen e2. And, well, yeah, my idea was, I think, to just discourage this move f5, which, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous because f5 is not, well, I mean, yeah, I guess in this position, if you played a4, maybe black could try f5, and then after bishop d3, take on d4. And even this is not really any picnic for black, because this is a pretty serious weakness, even for the cost of a pawn. But, okay, so queen e2 was just designed to stop that. But yeah, now black plays a5, and gets at least a little bit of counterplay. Now it turns out that even opening up the a file, so I play rook a4, I bring my queen back to b2, rook da8, and I play bishop b1 here. It turns out that even this is still not so great for black, because you have the open a file, but you have no way to infiltrate. This square is covered, this square is covered. You can go to a1, but it doesn't even do anything, and if you go right there right now, then I have this bishop h7 check, and I pick up the rook. And even if I didn't have that, the rook doesn't do anything on a1. So yeah, the one target on b4 is very easy for me to defend. The queen is ideally placed on b2. Anyway, also guarding the e5 square. So yeah, it turns out that opening up the a file doesn't help black at all. But yeah, in any case, it wasn't necessary to allow this. But okay, yeah, now probably the black could have resisted better than he did in the game. He played bishop c8, and I kind of saw what he was trying to do, so I set a little trap here. I played rook e3. And okay, he was playing very quickly this whole game, so he clearly was not, didn't seem like he was putting too much thought into many of his moves. He played this, like, yeah, not too much thought, and I think he just overlooked the move d5, which, after this, it's pretty clear that white is just winning, I think, because I'm either going to get a really strong fast pawn here, I'm going to open up the d-file, or you're going to take, which is what he does, and after rook takes d5, obviously you cannot take, because you get mated. But if you can't take, then yeah, I have a monster fast pawn here, and the rook is going to come to d6, so I can double on the d-file and threaten to invade there, so yeah, this is pretty much all over. Black still has no counterplay on the a-file. This bishop on b1 and queen on b2 is like the perfect defense over there. But yeah, I mean, black didn't have to allow that. He definitely could have resisted better by playing something else. I don't know, maybe queen c7. Although that still allows b5. Maybe you have to play. Yeah, it's not so easy. You don't want to play with like g6 and weaken your king side even more. I mean, maybe you try king f8. But yeah, even here I can play d5. So yeah, I mean, we can see it's already not so easy. Maybe queen f6. So, but yeah, after queen a7, d5, okay. Maybe yeah, the only other interesting variation here is bishop d7, hoping for d6, which here maybe there's some hope for black because it's hard to break through, and the bishop is actually doing a pretty nice job blocking the pass pawn. But yeah, I was calculating taking on queen c2. Okay, you can start with taking on e6, but yeah, and then after g6, which is forced, now I can take and play this exchange stack. And yeah, when I was evaluating this position from far away, so here, queen f7, queen takes e6, and I saw rook f8. Yeah, this is maybe an interesting tendency that I've noticed about myself where, I mean, I realize that white is probably much better here. In fact, white is, we can say, completely winning here. This is like plus 10, plus 11. And, you know, it's kind of easy to get afraid of black's like single threat to take on f2, but actually, in reality, white can just play like f4, or even rook f1. I mean, white does not actually have to do anything that dramatic here. It can just stop the threat. And black has no way to... It looks like, you know, the king is very open here. I'm kind of just... My instinct is very much against opening up the second rank like this when there's, you know, my opponent still has 3 major pieces on the board. But it turns out here that, yeah, black simply has no way to actually get the rest of these major pieces in to help. And the rook by itself cannot do anything. Like, you can play rook a1, but even there, I have bishop h7 check. I take the rook. Yeah, this rook by itself cannot do anything scary. Even if you take on b4, I can just take on h6, for example. And my queen and bishop create enough mating threats to prevent black from activating these two. So yeah, this would be completely winning for white. Which, yeah, I mean, that, of course, I realized white should be much better. The only thing I was a little bit unsure about was my own king. But yeah, if you just kind of calculate this concretely, you see after f4, black has no way to actually make another concrete threat. Because I mean, the queen cannot go far away from the king because I can start giving checks, and you can hear this is going to end in mate. In fact, yeah, here actually, queen h7 is mate in 1. So yeah, I can think once you convince yourself that the king is totally safe on g1, there's not any problem with going for this position. Okay, but anyway, that didn't happen. Takes on d5, rook takes d5, bishop d7, and okay, I mean at this point, white is winning. There's not really any fight left because I'm just gonna invade on the d file, and yeah, black's king is actually still weak, can counter attack. So he tries this. He plays f5 now. Yeah, I mean he didn't have to play f5, but the problem was I'm going to play queen d4, and the bishop is pinned to the back rank because d8 will be mate, covering the h7 square. So he plays f5, but yeah, now bishop comes back to f3. Black's king side has been permanently weakened. And okay, he tries to bring the king closer to defend, but yeah, this bishop h5 check, that was the last move of the game because he plays g6. I can take rook takes e6, is at least going to pick the bishop back up, probably leading to checkmate soon. So okay, yeah. So actually, I wanted to also look at a blitz game that I played with this exact same. We actually we had the exact same position up until move like 14 or 15, and I did actually learn from this game, and I played the correct strategy of a4 a5. And yeah, I think it's actually kind of interesting to see how that game turned out. So okay. So this game, yeah. So this is just some random blitz game I played online. I don't know who my opponent is, but I presume he's maybe master strength or so. But okay, anyway, the opening was pretty much exactly the same. Okay, I played a Catalan, but he played kind of the quiet passive move order with knight b7 and c6. And actually here, I think knight c3 maybe is a little bit inaccurate. So because this leads to the way that happened in our game, where knight d2 can be met with b5. If white doesn't want to allow that, you can start with queen c2, which also has the added bonus of not even allowing black any chance to take this pawn anymore. So we just take it right back. And then after like something like c6, we can play knight bd2, and we just very efficiently prepare e4. Like this is happening next move, and now we basically get the structure we're looking for. Yeah, knight c3. Okay, now after c6, like white cannot actually prepare e4 quite so directly. You have to kind of first play b3 to cover this pawn, and then play queen d3 and e4. You can't just directly play knight d2. Now I already knew from before that knight d2 is met with b5, but I played it anyway because I figured my opponent probably would not know to play the move b5 here, which I mean is not really the best way to play chess, but in a blitz game at least, yeah, it's fine. And yeah, my opponent did not know to play b5. He played b6, the same exact mistake my opponent made. And okay, and now I get e4, and we actually follow my game, my slow game for quite a few moves. I played bishop f4, he takes on e4, he plays knight f6. Play queen c2, he takes on e4. And the only difference here is he plays g6 instead of h6. And now, okay, I play rook d1, bishop f6, and I go for the exact same plan. I play bishop e5, I trade the dark square bishops, and I play c5. And this is a slightly better version for black, because he's already kind of preparing to attack the d4 pawn. But we'll see what happens in the game. He plays rook d8, I put the queen on c3, okay, I double rooks. After h5, okay, I throw in h4. Okay, he eventually also plays b5, because he, I guess, doesn't want to have to worry about me taking this and taking the c6. So he does this, b5. And yeah, now, this I kind of played with no hesitation. I played b4. Okay, black has resorted to just waiting around. He plays rook e7. He's not even threatening to play e5 because I can take and have a double attack on f6 and d8. Or I can maybe consider playing d5 there also, which actually probably is even better. Yeah, actually, I don't think this works because he can take 2 rooks for the queen. But yeah, after a4, a6, I play a5, and yeah, this is the correct decision here. And yeah, now I'm kind of ready to reposition my pieces like this, and then slowly improve my position, and eventually, force a breakthrough like we analyzed in that other variation. So this game kind of ended much more quickly than that. My opponent eventually decided to sacrifice the exchange. Plays rook d5 here. And yeah, this actually loses right away, because I can play rook f3, which I saw, and if the queen moves away, I can force this rook back. He has to sacrifice the exchange, because he cannot allow me to play d5 with check. And I'll play d6. Yeah, for some reason I didn't want to actually win the exchange here. So I played bishop b3, thinking that, yeah, I don't know, thinking that I'm gonna play rook f3 next move anyway. But yeah, here he gives away the exchange. He didn't really have to. Now here he can play rook f5 here. And maybe white can now try to play like f4 and then just try to trap this rook on f5. But yeah, okay, either way. If he doesn't do this, like if he comes back here and plays maybe a better way with king h7, then like I think white can still, even though white cannot actually get the same ideal position for the rook on e4, because here as soon as you play rook e3, you allow rook takes d4. So it's not so easy to organize your pieces in the best way here. But I think you can still do it. So yeah, kind of after playing around with this for a little while, I came with, yeah, this idea. So you can put the bishop on e4. Yeah, this still prevents e5 because I can take, and I'm taking the queen with a check. And even here, I think e5, I maybe don't take it right away. Although now here I can take, because you cannot take the pawn back, and this I won't take the queen, I'm going to take your rook. And now if you take this, then I will take your queen, and otherwise I'm just a pawn up. So yeah, e5 is never really achievable. But one thing you can do is you can put the queen on e3, and you can slowly move the king to c3. Yeah, black really was never able to do anything. And once the king is on c3, then you kind of gain some more freedom to maneuver. And the other thing you can do is put the queen on g5. Because this trade is probably going to be extra good for white. At least now we have even more of a grip on the position. Can probably slowly prepare the break with g4. Put the king to c3, and then slowly prepare g4, and then possibly invade on the h-file. Bishop endgames are probably going to be winning for white, because you kind of have to believe that there's going to be some zigzag eventually. And king can like eventually invade to e5, and then yeah, you kind of just have to believe that eventually there's going to be too many things for black to defend. To defend c6 on both of these invasion squares. And if there's any opening on the other side of the board, any other target for the bishop to get to, then yeah, it's going to be completely lost. But yeah, anyway, if black doesn't try to do that, then you can put the king on c3. And here we can see like white is completely in control now. Like this is very well protected, and now we can start to transition the rooks over to the f-file. And yeah, I mean at this point it's probably already lost for black. Now the rooks can come to the f-file, and yeah, you can kind of see the writing on the wall here. The rook will come to f6. The other rook can come to you can do this and double the rooks on the f-file. Yeah, so eventually there's going to be some sacrifice on g6 or f7 or play g4, and yeah, it's going to be lights out. So yeah, basically, even in this maybe slightly improved version for black, where white does not get the rooks ideally placed laterally defending the pawn, even in that case where black has some more pressure on d4, it's not really a fortress. I don't think white can still break through. So okay, yeah, but okay, I mean in the game he does this and gives away the exchange, and of course this is just easily winning for white, which yeah was okay. I mean I moved the king to c3 anyway because I have full control over the position at this point. I can do whatever I want. And he can just move back and forth, and eventually I trade queens and put the king on f4, and okay, yeah, just give back the exchange to take all of black's pawns, and yeah, this is completely winning. So, okay, yeah, I think it's definitely a good, good in-depth study of this pawn structure. And definitely a good little trick to know. Yeah, this knight d2 move. I mean, I'm actually curious who has allowed this. So, I mean, knight d2 has been played by some pretty high-rated grandmasters. I mean, even in like, I'm sure most of these are blitz games or rapid games. And actually, a lot of grandmasters have also had this position with black and have not played b5. So I mean, you can see, actually, yeah, you can probably see some of the names here. Like Artemiev has played b6, Andrew Tang has played b6. You know, okay, this guy, Saltaev, who's a 2400 player, he's played b5. Smirnov has played b5. Even Ivanchuk played, yeah, Ivanchuk. Oh, Ivanchuk did play b5 here. Okay, so Ivanchuk is at least knows this move. But yeah, it's actually kind of, even Magsudlo, he's kind of a strong junior player, but he did not play b5, he played b6. So yeah, I guess this tactic is maybe not super well known, but definitely a good little trick to add to the toolkit. So alright, we'll stop here and look at the next game.